in the story, there's an official or a nobleman, someone in power who has a son who is dying. In the mission of Jesus, Jesus is the true son, and he's the son not just of an official, but of the King and God of the universe. And the true son of the highest power, he comes and is sent, and he comes down. Notice what the Father asked Jesus to do multiple times in this passage. He asks him to come down to Capernaum. That verb there in Greek is used all throughout John chapter 6 and in John chapter 3 to describe the mission of Jesus. That it says in John chapter 3 in the conversation with Nicodemus that the Son of Man has descended from heaven. And in John chapter 6, it says that he is the bread of heaven who has come down. And so here, the true son, the Father is asking, hey, I want you to come down and heal my son. And Jesus, he is the true son of the true Father, the true King, who can answer to that Father legitimately and says, yeah, I have come down. I am here right now. I have descended from the courts of the Lord, the highest palace, to this earth as the true son. And I'm not only just going to be sick to the point of death, I'm going to actually die so that any son might be able to live. Any son, any daughter can be resurrected, can be given new life because I am going to die. Surely he has borne our iniquities and carried our sorrows, yet we have esteemed him stricken, it says in Isaiah 53. He bears the sicknesses. He bears the pain. He bears the death on the cross so that way any son might be able to live. And so this prefigures this descension that the Father was asking of Jesus to do. Jesus can say, yeah, I have descended. I have come down, and I'm going to die so that way your son can live.
All right, welcome back to the Bible podcast. We are in John chapter 4, going verse 43 to 54. We just finished up. The Samaritans declared, and we know that this is indeed the Savior of the world. Mm-hmm. After that verse, we're rolling right into 43, where it says, after the 2 days, he departed for Galilee, for Jesus himself had testified that a prophet has no honor in his own hometown. So when he came to Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him, having seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the feast, for they too had gone to the feast.
So what's interesting is that Jesus is saying that a prophet is not without honor except for in his hometown, seems to be contradicted by the fact that the Galileans welcome him. Right. He's like, oh yeah, like every hometown, they rejects the prophets or whatever. And then he goes home and the Galileans where he's from are like, yeah, welcome, come on in. And so what I think is going on is you can see here, they're saying that the Galileans welcomed him because they saw all that he had done in Jerusalem during the feast. And so what happened in Jerusalem during the Feast of Passover just a couple chapters previously? Do you remember?
No.
Yeah. Perfect. We can remind everyone what happened. So in John chapter 2, Jesus was down at the Passover, and during the feast, he cleanses the temple.
Right.
And so he flips the tables, does the whole thing, and they ask him, by what authority do you do these things? And he says, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I'll raise it again. That whole thing happens there in Jerusalem. And so the Galileans had gone down to Jerusalem for the Passover feast and witnessed this incredible event.
Right.
And so now they're hearing, oh, this prophet is coming back to Galilee. He did this crazy sign. This thing happened. Well, let's go ahead and welcome him in and see what's going on here. And they are testing him still. They're still trying to figure him out. And in the next verse, in verse 46, it says, so he came again to Cana in Galilee, where he had made the water wine. So again, referencing back to John chapter 2, the transformation of the water into wine at the wedding in Cana.
Right.
And so these Galileans, they're interested in Jesus, but their interest in Jesus is dependent upon his performance and miracles and doing tricks and things.
Right. They're like, do you want to make us some wine?
Yeah, exactly. They're like, what can we get out of this? What kind of news is he going to generate? They're interested in welcoming him, but it's based upon signs and miracles, not based upon the person of Jesus himself.
So when it says he has no honor, they're saying they're not honoring himself, It's basically like, what kind of miracles or signs are you going to perform for us?
Exactly. And back in John chapter 2, which is the chapter that includes the transformation of water into wine in Cana and the sign in Jerusalem, the cleansing of the temple, it says right at the end of the chapter, it says, "Now when he was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed in his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people." So these people, they're trusting in Jesus or believing in Jesus, but it's just based upon signs. It's just based upon miracles. And so Jesus recognizes the shallowness of that faith and the inauthenticity of that faith. And so he doesn't entrust himself to them. And so these Galileans are of that sort. They saw the sign that happened in Jerusalem. They have this belief, but it's only based on signs. In contrast to what we just saw happen in Samaria that you just mentioned.
Right.
Did Jesus perform any sign in Samaria?
No, he was just talking to that lady.
Just literally talking to that lady and spent 2 days with them talking.
Right.
Sharing about his character and his mission and all of those things, that he's the living waters. And they were like, this guy, he's the savior of the world.
Right.
They believed without signs. Whereas his hometown, if you will, his home people, his own that he came to, as it says in John chapter 1, they received him not. They were expecting some kind of signs or belief. And so the story that we have in the next few verses is a story of the healing of the nobleman's or the official's son. And this nobleman or official, he is the representative or the case study for belief based upon signs and the inadequacy of that. That's what's coming ahead. And that's why John uses that transition phrase and saying that, Jesus, he recognized that his own people were ultimately not honoring him the way that he deserved. Instead, it was simply based on signs.
Right.
So pay attention to that as we go into this story. Let's look at this official's faith. Where it says in verse 46, "And at Capernaum there was an official whose son was ill. When this man heard that Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee, he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. So Jesus said to him, 'Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe.' The official said to him, 'Sir, come down before my child dies.'" And at first, that response to Jesus is kind of startling, right? It's like, here's this father coming to Jesus, asking for healing for his son, and Jesus is like, everyone just wants to see signs and wonders.
Yeah, you're like, I think he just wants his son healed.
Yeah, exactly. But there's a hint that doesn't really come across super well in English, that Jesus is speaking to not just the official, but to kind of the broader context and all of the Galileans. And the word "you" in verse 48, where it says, "So Jesus said to him, 'Unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe,' is plural in the original Greek.
Right.
It's not singular. So he's speaking to the entire nation.
Right.
He's speaking to everyone and saying, unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe.
So playing on that theme of the Galileans just trusting in Jesus' miracles, he's saying to all of you, you should be believing without miracles.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so he is saying that miracles can be a good starting point for faith, as we'll see later on, but it's not a great ending point. It's not a good foundation for faith. And I kind of thought for a little while of why that is. And like, if there's anything in this passage can help us to understand, like, why would faith based upon miracles be inadequate or, illegitimate? Because it seems like, like the father's going there and asking for healing. Like, that seems like a legitimate ask or something,
Right.
Like, why is this being indicted by Jesus? And I think there's a couple reasons why. And I thought it would be best to learn at the feet of C.S. Lewis for this conversation. He is a legend. If you have not read C.S. Lewis before, he is a fantastic author of both theology and fiction. He's the best. So I thought it might be helpful for us to learn at the feet of C.S. Lewis for this conversation. And C.S. Lewis, in his book, The Problem of Pain, he talks about how we approach God. And in our approach to God, he says this. C.S. Lewis says, he can't be used as a road. If you're approaching him not as the goal, but as a road, not as the end, but as a means, you're not really approaching him at all. And so here, this father comes to Jesus asking for healing for his son, which that in one sense is a legitimate ask, but it's approaching Jesus as a means to another end. It's
good end.
A good end.
Yeah.
And so even though it's a good end, it's ultimately inadequate because God being used as a means to anything is to really not approach him at all. It's to approach him as a road, as C.S. Lewis says. It's like, okay, this is the path that I can follow. If I follow this path, then I'll get to the destination that I desire.
Right.
And that's ultimately demonstrating the fact that Jesus isn't our true desire. Like if someone comes to Jesus and is trying to like get something from him as the main thing, then ultimately that other thing is your true God.
Yeah.
And so C.S. Lewis here is making sure to communicate, hey, when we approach God, he needs to be our true and ultimate end. It needs to be our true and ultimate desire, and not just a road, not just a path, but truly the end in and of himself, the destination. And I think this really comes out in actually Moses' conversation with Jesus at the burning bush. This is going to be a significant story later on in the Gospel of John.
Did you want to say that it was Moses' conversation with Jesus? Because, I mean, that's technically true, but were you wanting to say Yahweh?
What did I say?
You said Moses' conversation with Jesus.
Moses' conversation with Yahweh. That's a better way to put it.
Okay.
That conversation is going to take significant precedent over the next few chapters in the Gospel of John. And in that conversation, Moses asks Yahweh for his name. And Yahweh responds with, I am, as his name. And we're going to see Jesus really play on that over the next few weeks in John's gospel by saying he is the bread of life and he is the good shepherd and all those I am statements. But in this conversation that Moses has with Yahweh, Yahweh is revealing himself as the I am, which means he gets to define the terms of the relationship.
Yeah.
Like, he is not the one who reveals himself to be, I am whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, right. I am whatever you need in the moment. Like, I am your genie. I am whatever you think you need. He says, I am who I am. And so I get to define the terms of the relationship. I am God. I reveal myself. And so this isn't I'm just your genie in a bottle.
Right. There's no negotiation.
Yeah, there's no negotiation. And that's what C.S. Lewis means, where if we approach him as a means to an end, we're not really approaching him at all. We're approaching a shadow of who he is, or a projection of who we think he is.
Right.
And not who he truly is.
Totally. Okay, cool. So then what's the other aspect? You said there was a couple reasons. What's the second? Yeah,
so another reason why I think the faith based upon miracles is inadequate is because it puts constraints upon God. If the first reason why is that faith based upon miracles uses God, the second reason why is because it constrains God or binds God. Notice the conversation that this official has with Jesus. He says that he went to him and asked him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. All of the commentators that I read pointed out the fact that this official was assuming that he knew the limits of Jesus' power.
You got to come over here and do it.
You got to come over here and you got to do it before he dies. In other stories, we'll see even the centurion who approaches Jesus and he says, don't even come to my house and you can heal my servant. Like, you don't even have to come to my house. You can heal him from afar.
Right.
And Jesus marvels at that level of faith, and he recognizes that is genuine faith, that it's not constrained. Like, you can do whatever you want, Jesus. Like, if you don't want to come to my house, like, you don't have to. I believe that you can do whatever you want. Here, the official's like, no, you need to come down. and you need to come to my house. And then also you need to heal him before he dies. Jesus can raise the dead.
Right.
He's assuming that like, oh, if my son dies, then
It's over.
It's over.
Right.
But that's not necessarily the case. He's putting constraints on Jesus's power and trying to make him do what he wants. And that's ultimately what happens every time our faith is based upon miracles. Is we're saying, God, you have to do this narrow thing that I've decided, and if not, then I'm out. And these constraints that we put on God ultimately lead us into a shallow faith that can't last disappointment or maybe an unanswered prayer. And again, C.S. Lewis answers this perfectly because he shows us that in this quote that I'm about to read, C.S. Lewis demonstrates that God is doing so much more in every circumstance than we can really imagine. Like we can approach him and we think, oh, he can do this, he can do that, he can do the other, but there's so much more that's going on in every single situation. So when we tell God, you have to do this one narrow thing, we're confessing and realizing that we really have no idea what's going on. Like there's so much more.
Yeah.
Like it's demonstrating that our minds are so much smaller.
Right, totally.
And so I'll read this little quote from C.S. Lewis. He says, imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps you can understand what he is doing. He's getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you were not surprised. But presently he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself. And so in this conversation, Jesus, he's doing and intends to do so much more than this nobleman or this official can comprehend. And when we come to Jesus and we say, okay, like you have to do this one specific thing. Yeah, you need to fix these leaks and you need to do this work on the drains and you need to rebuild that wall. He's saying, no, I'm going to start knocking down walls. I'm going to start putting up towers and extra wings that you can't even comprehend because I'm building a mansion.
Yeah.
And so often when we approach Jesus and we say, okay, you have to do this one thing, we have this narrow view. And what if God, in his sovereignty, as he does so many times, allows the child to die or allows the prayer to go unanswered? It's because he is using even that to create a weight of glory or a palace and a mansion that we can't even comprehend.
Right.
And that is the kind of faith that cannot be based on miracles. The kind of faith that believes that he's building something so much bigger than I can imagine. That kind of faith, if it can't be based on miracles, it has to be based on the person and character and love of Christ. Because it's the only way that we'll be able to withstand the kind of abominable knocking that can happen throughout our lives.
Right, and that makes me think a little bit about Jesus's perfect prayers where he says, Father, not my will, but yours be done. And so in total submission to the Father, Jesus prays in a way that we should be praying, not my will, but yours be done. And so coming to him with a heart that's not saying, I want you to do this in this way, that's just how I like it, but a posture that says, Jesus, my son's dying, help me.
Yeah.
You know, that's however you're going to do that.
Yeah.
I need you.
Yeah. Yeah.
In this circumstance is a different way
Yeah.
of speaking to him than come on down here and heal my son.
Yeah.
Quick before he dies.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
like all
Yeah.
of those, it's a different way of praying.
Yeah, exactly. But what's amazing is that Jesus is so gracious. Mm-hmm. Like he is so gracious and willing to meet people where they're at in order to try and reveal himself to them and to draw them to himself. And so even though this official is demonstrating inadequate faith, Jesus responds in verse 49, the official said to him, Sir, come down before my child dies. And in verse 50, Jesus said to him, Go, your son will live. The man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him and went on his way. As he was going down, his servants met him and told him that his son was recovering. So he asked them the hour when he began to get better, and they said to him, "Yesterday at the 7th hour, the fever left him." The father knew that that was the hour when Jesus had said to him, "Your son will live." And he himself believed, and all his household. So again, this official, who was probably a official in the court of King Herod at the time, Herod the Tetrarch, and he comes to Jesus. Jesus responds, says that your son is going to live. He goes, finds out that his son is recovering, that he is going to live, and he believes, him and his whole household. The immeasurable grace of Jesus to accept and meet someone who has a manipulative faith, essentially, and to still meet them where they were at, because he knew that is what this person needed in order to be able to come to the full measure of faith. And so coming to Jesus in desperation is not a bad place to start. Like, if you're in a desperate situation and have no other place to turn, and you finally just turn to God in a half-hearted, selfish prayer, that's a good place to start. It's a great place to start. Like, you might not realize it at the time, or you might not know what you're doing at the time. You might not know who you're praying to or why you're praying or anything like that. That is a great place to start. And Jesus wants to meet you in that place. That doesn't mean he's going to give you the answer to your prayer, because you remember, he's doing something so much bigger than you can imagine.
Yeah.
But he wants to meet you exactly where you're at and lead you into a full faith that this official in the king's court now is saved, and his entire household, which means all of his family, probably has servants, like all of this. It creates this incredible transformation in the halls of power.
Yeah.
Imagine how gracious Jesus is to meet someone where they're at in that way, in order to bring them into the fullness of faith that they really need.
It's awesome. So this is teaching us that God answers inadequate prayers in better ways than they were being asked for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that can manifest itself in so many different ways. It can be unanswered prayers. It can be answered prayers in ways that you wouldn't have expected. It can be direct answer to prayers. It can manifest itself in so many different ways, but God in his sovereignty knows the exact way to answer it, so that way he gets the most glory. And so that way his grace is proclaimed and his son is magnified. He knows the exact way to deal with every single person.
Yeah.
And so that gives me so much hope and trust, knowing that everyone who comes to Jesus will get the answer and the response and the outcome that is the exact perfect response and outcome for God's glory.
Right. I'm thinking about it. If Jesus had just right off the bat said, all right, I'm going to stop what I'm doing here. I'm going to go down. Like, prayers would not have been answered if he had left to go with them, traveled. It sounds like it's about a full day's journey. And if he goes down there and he heals the boy, they're like, wow, he's a really good doctor. He had to come in person, and, like, it's possible that his whole household doesn't even come to faith in Jesus if Jesus answered the prayer in the way that he wanted, right?
Yeah.
Because it would have been a less powerful, less big miracle than here's a guy who, the moment he says, your son's going to get better, boom, he gets better from a distance. That's only God can do that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Maybe he's just a really good doctor if he actually gets there in person and all that. And so that's just the alternate ending doesn't end up with as much glory for Jesus it's possible that happens. So,
He's building a mansion.
Yeah.
Not just a little cottage. He's doing something so much bigger than we can imagine. And what's amazing is that then this story ends in such a surprising way to me, where in verse 54, it says, "This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee." So this is the second sign.
Is this the second sign?
I know.
I thought, so first sign was the wedding, water to wine, and then he cleanses the temple. That seems like a sign. And then he's, doing miraculous heart changes in Samaria. That also seems like maybe a sign. Like,
Yeah.
tell me what's going on.
Yeah, so I think what John is doing is he's trying to link the story of Cana and what happened at Cana to this story that happened in Cana. And that story that happened in Cana in John chapter 2 was the turning of water into wine, which is identified as the first sign. And then now this is the second sign that is happening, and it's also in the same location. And so they're trying to tie these ones together. And I think the reason that he does this is because, remember, a sign is meant to communicate something about the mission and vision of Jesus and what he has come to do. And we went through all of that in John chapter 2 with the turning of the water into wine, of what's going on there. Mm-hmm. And here I think there's something also going on that's meant to communicate about the mission of Jesus and prefigure what he is going to accomplish later in the Gospel of John.
Yeah, what does this tell us about Jesus' mission?
So I think what is happening here is, in the story, there's an official or a nobleman, someone in power who has a son who is dying. And in the mission of Jesus, Jesus is the true son. And he's the son, not just of an official, but of the King and God of the universe.
The highest power.
The highest power. And the true son of the highest power, he comes and is sent, and he comes down. Notice what the Father asked Jesus to do multiple times in this passage. He asks him to come down to Capernaum twice. That verb there in Greek is used all throughout John chapter 6 and in John chapter 3 to describe the mission of Jesus. That it says in John chapter 3 in the conversation with Nicodemus that the Son of Man has descended from heaven.
He's come down.
He's come down. And in John chapter 6, it says that he is the bread of heaven who has come down. And so here, the true son, the Father is asking, hey, I want you to come down and heal my son. And Jesus, he is the true son of the true Father, the true King, who can answer to that Father legitimately and says, yeah, I have come down. I am here right now. I have descended from the courts of the Lord, the highest palace, to this earth as the true son. And I'm not only just going to be sick to the point of death.
I'm going to actually die.
I'm going to actually die. I'm going to actually die so that any son might be able to live. Not just the sons of Jerusalem or the sons of Samaria or the sons of a nobleman or the sons of whoever it might be. Instead, any son, any daughter can be resurrected, can be given new life, because I am going to die and I am going to take. Surely he has borne our iniquities and carried our sorrows, yet we have esteemed him stricken, it says in Isaiah 53. He bears the sicknesses. He bears the pain. He bears the death on the cross, so that way any son might be able to live. And so this prefigures this descension that the Father was asking of Jesus to do. Jesus can say, yeah, I have descended. I have come down, and I'm going to die so that way your son can live.
That's so powerful.
And so this is the second sign that speaks to the purpose and mission of Jesus, that he is the true son of the ultimate nobleman, the King of the universe, who has come and descended to this earth in order to be able to die in the place of we who are sick, so that we can be resurrected and walk in the newness of life. And we now have that hope and peace and security, knowing that we are forgiven. And that gives us true, genuine faith. Where now it's not like, I need to manipulate God in order to get what I want and put these constraints on him, or I need to have this sign or this miracle or whatever. Instead, we can come to him and say, if you are the God of the universe who sent your son, and you, God, came down in order to be able to die in my place, your plan is good. Your plan is right. And what you're doing, I can trust.
And that's where real faith comes from.
That's where real faith comes from.
So cool. So the first sign tells us that God takes our dishonor and shame and turns it to great honor and makes and new creation of us. The second sign shows us that he comes down that we might live. And these stories perfectly illustrate those truths.
Exactly.
And more truths.
That and more. Yeah. There's always more.
There's always more. I love it. Well, is that a good place to stop?
I think that's a good place to stop. I think that's the end of chapter 4. We've made it through chapter 4. We did it. Yeah. So first 4 chapters down, and we'll pick up chapter 5 on the next podcast.
Okay. The grass withers.
The flower fades.
But the word of the Lord endures forever.
Amen.